All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to those joining us from around the world. Welcome to the AI to UX Now webinar. I'm Jennifer Casey, Senior Marketing Director at Cognizant, and your host for today's session. Coming to you live from Wells, Maine. Over the next hour, we'll have a fireside chat for about 45 minutes, and then we'll start a Q&A for the last 15 minutes of the session. And throughout, we'd love to hear your thoughts, comments, questions. So join us in the chat by pressing the chat button at the bottom of your screen. And then also, please submit questions for the Q&A by hitting the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen for our speakers. And to note, this webinar is being recorded and the replay will be sent out to you within about 24 hours after the session. Now, I'm joined by my two esteemed colleagues, Brett Greenstein and Andres Angelani. Let's get to know them a little bit more. Hi, Brett. Please welcome Brett Greenstein, SVP and Global Head of AI and Analytics at Cognizant. Glad to have you here, Brett.
Thank you very much. I'm very excited to be here and to talk about something that we all feel very passionately about.
Can you share more about you and a little bit of your background?
Of course. So I do lead our AI and A practice globally for Cognizant. It's a very, very large business with tens of thousands of people who do AI and data transformation for clients, helping people to modernize their data, to make it accessible, to make it useful then in analytics and AI projects where we do some of the most advanced work in the world on prediction and prescription and analytics to help drive business. And I've been here about 2 years. And prior to that, I spent my entire career with IBM, working on a variety of programs from Watson and the Internet of Things. And also I was our CIO in Asia. So I have a long history in the technology and data space. And I'm based in the Northeast in the United States.
Wonderful. Thanks, Brett. And welcome also to Andres Angelani, Chief Executive Officer at Cognizant Softvision. Glad you could be here. Thanks for joining us, Andres.
Thank you, Jennifer. It's a pleasure to be here. I started developing products since I was a kid, about 10 years old, with a Commodore 64, so you can tell my age, definitely not a kid. I currently lead this division at Cognizant, which is dedicated to helping clients become tech companies, really building products for them and alongside them. We call it digital products engineering here. It's very exciting. It's an exciting business. It's about innovation. It's about the growth of the talent. It's about the it's about to instill methodologies to make them more agile, to help kind of the companies, clients partner with us and evolve as they're doing it. My history, as I said, I started developing myself internet products. Then I joined a company where I had the opportunity to be one of the pioneers, and I ended up developing video games, AAA video games. I sort of understood and kind of really comprehended what it is to build highly experienced interactive products, and that kind of helped us to sort of develop our own methodology to how we go about building products for the big masses to kind of create that emotional connection. So currently, I'm really happy to be here today, and we're going to talk about how we relate and how AI and experiences come together to really maximize business outcomes and overall just increase the level of insights and understanding while we build these either products or features for our clients and for ourselves.
Awesome. Thanks, Andres. All right, let's dive into the reason why we're all here, AI to UX and how enterprises can become a data powerhouse right now. Digital transformation is essential. It's especially now in today's environment. And according to a recent survey, actually, of the CEOs of the Fortune 500 list, 75% cited that the pandemic accelerated the pace of digital transformation within their enterprise, within their organization. And two key components of that is data and intelligence, especially when designing for user experience. But how do you get started? How do you understand the data? How do you apply the intelligence and create those exceptional user experiences that are meaningful and more effective for your customers, your employees, your end users? Well, that's why we're here today, and that's what we're going to discuss. So let's dive right in. The first question, it goes to you, Brett. So as Cognizant's head of AI, I wanted to kick it off with you to get us started. And AI is just a really popular focus for organizations right now. Organizations, analysts, the media, journalists, it's in the market everywhere. Practically speaking though, like how or what are some of those quick wins or MVP projects using AI and data that can enable organizations to start becoming data-driven? Or in other words, how do you take a high-level goal for your company's AI strategy and create actionable steps towards achieving it?
So there's a lot of different ways people get started. Some of the easiest and most relatable ones are around conversational AI. So the ability to speak to a system, to type to a chatbot, or talk to Alexa or Google. These are entry points that a lot of people use to get started. And it's fundamentally not just about the fact that you can speak and it's understood, but you're digitizing the user experience, which means that now you're capturing the words and the tone and the intent and interactions of people, which begins to get you a deeper understanding of your users. So that is one definite entry point that a lot of people use. Another is really around leveraging some of the capabilities of AI to understand unstructured data. Most enterprises make decisions today based on ERP or back office systems, the data that they are used to, the data they know. But 80% of the really valuable data is stuff that's unquantified, unstructured, messy. A lot of it is external data. It can be images, it can be voice, it can be video, sound, lots of different forms, IoT data. So companies are using AI to turn that noise into meaningful insights. The images in the parking lot at a retail store tells you exactly how much traffic is coming in and out of that store. But more importantly, those same cameras aimed across the road tell you how much your competition is getting traffic as well. If you can interpret the images, you can use them. And then the third major entry point that a lot of people consider is just improving their ability to understand the operational data of their business, to predict what's going to happen. It's not hard to draw a line and say, if we made 2% more revenue every quarter, we're probably going to make 2% more now. But realistically, I think what we all experienced with the pandemic was that what worked last week, last month, or last year does not work today. And so the ability to have models and forecast models that adapt with changing data and changing times is a competitive advantage. And so more and more companies are leveraging machine learning and AI specifically to drive better forecasting systems. I think you can hear through all of those examples, they all lead to an experience of some type.
Yeah, actually, you talked about meaningful experiences, but can you talk more about the relationship between personalized experiences and being data-driven? One seems to be an outcome where the other, data-driven, it's a methodology or organizational focus. Do you think personalization can go beyond better experiences and also create new data, and how?
So the beauty of personalization, when we do this with individuals, with people, is that I get to know more about you, and then each experience that I have with you, I can serve whatever needs you have better. So we used to rely on the person who ran the corner store to know us in our small town. You walk up, they knew you bought groceries every week, what you typically buy, they remind you what's on deal, on special. That was personalization really at a personal level. As companies scale and do more e-commerce and online, personalization is actually much harder. The distance between people who make decisions and you is even bigger than it's ever been. So you need more systems that can really understand you, how you fit in related to other customers, what your needs are, the contextual data around your life, where you're located, for example, what's happening in your town, what sports events are nearby. Anything that can contextualize the experience better can be driven by data. You'll often hear people talk about how they're using hyper-local data, like what's happening right near you right now, or social data or other things about you to give a much better sense of what you care about so that the offers are valuable. Nobody wants to be boring. They want to offer something valuable, and the only way to do that is to know you.
Very good. Thanks, Brett. And AI is only as good as the data that it has. And kind of switching a little bit, but over to Andreas. Cognizant Softvision's focus is not only an AI-based application, of course, but what are some of the interesting ways AI is being applied at a larger scale? Software work where with your clients right now that you're working with? Anything interesting being built that you can share?
Yeah, sure. So, think about the existing digital products today, most of them don't really leverage AI, at least not in its full extent. So when you have the data, you have the insights, what do you do with that? How do you activate that? But what's interesting here is that normally most products, they have if-then type of decision-making inside. That's not very sophisticated, it's very linear. So how does the experience change, become much more surprising, really timely, leverages the data in a way that the experience can completely morph and change. And products, the face of the product can continue totally morph. Some products are AI native, a chatbot, for example, but that's a simpler interface. What about a mobile product? What about any integrated cross-platform product that has been already implemented? How to apply that artificial intelligence to it? And that's where some of the how we develop, how we engineer the product comes to relevance, because it's fundamentally critical to release as quickly as possible, to understand the data and then have an UI that adapts and morph to that particular environment, to that particular data set. For example, some of the things that we have built, we built a bank, did a full digital bank, right? And then predictive analytics helped us figure out when to put loan products in front of certain customers, right? Avoid unnecessary underwriting steps, be faster time to market. But in order to bring this experience to life, we need to understand how to action on these insights and how the entire product would react, what to show, how to lead the customer into a conversion funnel in a much more natural, more surprising way that really shows the customer that we intimately understand where he or she is at. That's the successful product versus the not. That's a great product versus an okay product. And really in the market right now, in terms of how the product performs, a great product is the one that will win. An okay product will really compete with a whole lot of others out there. So we believe that AI and the insights that come from AI plus a product engineering cycle that is very aware of these data points and the increasing richness of the data points that learns through the combination of all the data that we understand through personalization and through understanding that customer, also behavioral data, and draw conclusions from that, can actually have the potential to making products great, not just okay.
Thanks, Andres. That's very insightful and really interesting to hear some of the work that you've been doing with clients. And as you talk more about data, of course, Brett, kind of back to you. I've heard a lot about, or I've heard you talk a lot about data activation, which is related but not quite the same as data enablement, which is another popular term in AI and big data. So how do you define data activation?
I think Andres touched on the beginnings of that, which is the essence of the fact that when data that you can take action on is more valuable than all the other data, and turning it into something actionable is really an experience-driven exercise. I think one of the things that people think about is the world is growing in the amount of data exponentially all the time, but more data doesn't make you more digital. The fact is that most people don't know which data actually matters to make better decisions. And if you think of the constant pursuit to better understand people, what Andres was referring to, it doesn't just mean absorb all the data about them. What I bought yesterday may or may not be relevant to the experience I'm having right now in your store at this moment. Where I'm located, the weather nearby, anything. What I posted on Facebook yesterday may or may not have any relevance or causal relationship to my decision to buy something today. So some of the best practices around this are understanding which data has the most causal relationship to the outcome you want. If it's to convert someone to buy something, if it's to optimize a business process, some data matters more than others. Some data is very timely. A lot of people think about IoT data being just this massive amount of information. The truth is most of that data is really, really boring until something happens. So knowing when those moments happen that matter is the key. So when we talk about data activation, we're looking at understanding which data matters most, using some tools and techniques to understand the causality of data, and then turning it into insights that actually generate a business outcome. That's when activation happens. When you present the right information in that user experience that gets me excited and makes me want to click and then buy something, that is completely different than putting something in front of me that is annoying or just adds another abstraction between me and the value I want. So there's a huge difference between good and not good. And users know it. And it comes from really understanding how to turn that data into something actionable and powerful.
Yep, it's actually interesting because many enterprises just want all the data they can possibly get their hands on. But it's really the data that matters. Understanding which data points actually you can use to create actionable insights.
Yeah, just to continue that, I worked with an industrial company, and they originally said, just give us all the data because we don't know which one data we'll need later. And we added it all up. They wanted to do it all in the cloud. The bill was massive. And what they realized is they wanted the insights from the data. So all the streaming data coming off a device wasn't interesting. What they wanted to know is when it breaks, or when it's about to break, or when someone interacts with it. Those moments were more valuable than all the other data behind it.
Yeah. And Andreas, maybe you can expand on Brett's point about data activation. How does Cognizant Softvision apply thinking of the end user, the user experiences delivered through software to create data activation?
Yeah, so as following on Brett's comment is, what data, what quality, where, when, all that it matters, right? So it's a multidimensional problem to figure out what the right experience what the right experience is, and when does it need to be delivered to the customer, right? To create that engagement. So again, an okay product versus a great product, or okay experience versus a great experience. When I mention products, in my world, products are experiences, right? That's how it is, and software is the business. So that's the context in which we need to think about, how we move forward with this stuff. So when I'm talking about experience, I'm talking about an emotional connection. So an emotional connection between me and a brand, between me and a service, and how do you generate that emotional connection, that sense, right, of that you're taken care of. That's the human touch. It's like that, that very particular, surprising, either a notification or a referral or something that happened at a moment in time that really improved how you were experiencing that moment, how you live, and in aggregate, how you live, right? So how your purchasing experience, the benefits, and how you can make use of or really reap the benefits of the money that you have invested in a bank. What are the options? The more options that you provide that are understandable, that are simple, they're not just abundant, right? Abundance really complicates, confuses people. That's not the way. So just to give an example, I was working in a project many years ago when we started with digital, and it was at Disney Parks and Resorts. And if you remember, the rides, the waiting lines could be, sometimes a couple hours, and you're there with the kids, and it's sunny and you're sweating in the sun. It's a horrible experience, right? So we came up with this idea of understanding what the queues and the lines were. That's obviously kind of real-time data, measuring that and figuring out a way to distribute people around using their mobile phones, and build something that we called FastPass Plus. And it's basically, you can book a ride, and now it's general and it's all over the place, but you can book a ride and you can go within a time, but you don't have to go to a ride and figure out what's going on. It's just basically that Disney gives you that kind of experience. And it really changed perception for parents. Kids may tolerate it, parents don't really, especially when the kids are not in the greatest mood. So that's one example where, that you want to come back, or it just gives you a way better experience, right? Another example that it's not invented yet, but it's very relevant to COVID, right? We do have this technology, but we haven't put it together yet. And that's, again, it's artificial intelligence in action here. So think about a system that learns as people and understands people emotional cues, or students in this case, in front of a computer while they're going coursework. The emotional interpretation, facial emotional reading already exists. So you can really detect through AI whether the kid is bored, if he's completely distracted, or is actually paying attention. And think about an experience that, again, morphs and adapts to those emotional cues and puts kids in their optimum learning zone. If we had had that during COVID now, think about the outcome, right? Think about the emotional connections. I'm sure that parents would love that, right? Other applications of AI and experiences are also, while we drive, the car can be emotionally sensitive to what's happening with us. If we're too distracted, it can give us cues, and the experience would be to help us adopt, micro habits that would improve our driving experience, hence improve the insurance premiums, lower the cost footprint. There you go, right? So when we're talking about experiences, it's not just that particular linear, I see a data point and I react. Is within the longer cycle, in the long run, as I engage with the product again and I have another experience, how do I cumulatively learn progressively and just increase that emotional connection as we iterate in user behavior? So I know it's complex, but that's what distinguishes the good from, or the okay from the great experiences. That's where we should all aim to. And obviously there are techniques and methodologies and things that we follow that are kind of rule of thumb as we build products for customers that have those learnings and experiences as a product engineering team already built in. So we figured out we don't take anything for granted. We always go to real-time data. And it's the more intelligent the systems, then the more we see how we can leverage it and at the highest frequency possible. So we were releasing code to market or to production in small increments and at very high frequency that allows us to also test the learnings, right? Test those insights. But it's not just about machine recognizing patterns and predicting, it's also understanding how the reaction is and then feeding back the machine. So it's not that these things work in separately, right? They work together. The more data the machine gets, the more it learns, the better the experience. And that's how it should be kind of set up and constructed.
Yeah, it's really building the intelligence in it, not just laying it on top of it. It's
yeah,
the combination that really makes the difference.
Yeah.
All right, back to you, Brad. Are there any AI projects that you're undertaking that have no experience element, or does it inevitably just come back to experience?
It always comes back to experience because it's about the employees or the customers or the data scientists working with the system or the developers. It always is about people in some way. I was reflecting this morning, I tried to sign up for a service online. There's a new service that came out. And I was thinking about it as I was signing up. I started signing up, it asked me like 2 questions and said, okay, great, we're gonna move you ahead of the line, ahead of 250,000 other people, you get this like right away. I got all excited. I thought, here's a great experience that very quickly assessed, I'm the kind of target buyer they want, so they moved me in front of all these people. Probably didn't really happen. I'm probably on the same list as everyone else and didn't know it. But then as soon as I engaged with them, because I got excited about the experience, it pivoted and just started asking me a bunch of annoying questions. And that was to me the worst side of the experience, because what I realized is they don't actually know anything about me. And they were using this experience to just learn from me. I think when AI and data is done right, it's transparent to the person. It's a part of the experience, it informs the experience, but it's not in your face, requiring you to submit a bunch of stuff in a form. I think back to the earliest experiences with Netflix, when they were still sending out DVDs. They had built a recommendation engine to recommend based on your past viewing and other people like you what you might want to see. Everyone does that now, but back then it was pretty innovative. And I never filled out a survey to say what kind of movie did I like, who's my favorite director. They just built up a profile over time and then began to recommend things. And then they ran contests to see who could build a better algorithm. they were very data and algorithmic centric right from the start. Now that's standard business for people. And now the question is, how do you keep making it better? How do you make it so that when the company does something for you, it's almost magical, and doesn't go all the way to creepy. It's just they know enough about you to present what you need to know to get you excited and engaged with the product. Not so much that it feels invasive and not annoying in the sense that you have to manually input a bunch of stuff. And I think it's that balance point that's been really hard for a lot of companies. And you'll see a lot of experimentation with personalization where, I worked with a small AI firm out of Toronto. They were trying to build a bot to help people get healthier lives. And so at first, it would just sort of follow along with you, ask you how you're doing, ask you your feelings, very non-invasive at first, and then start to recommend things. But they quickly realized they didn't know enough about people to be useful, so they had to become annoying to become useful. And that obviously defeated the purpose. They then pivoted and realized what they do know about people, they attached to the wearables. They could tell from gestures what people were doing during the day. Most importantly, they could tell if people were smoking. So once they started to realize that the wearables happened to correspond with the hand people smoke with, they could detect people smoking, and they offered a program to help people quit smoking. That was super popular because it required no human intervention. It was just an app on the watch that became part of the experience and then guided you to a healthier life. That was AI used well, but the same people had failed at several other attempts before. And I think finding those moments where you have the right data to transform an experience in a way that is non-invasive but actually very helpful, those are magic moments. Netflix did it with their DVDs. My friend did it with the Quit Smoking app. These moments happen. There's another guy I worked with he got a lot of parking tickets. So he decided instead of appealing them manually, he trained a small AI to just read in the tickets, understand the local laws, and then file an automated appeal. And he did it mostly because he wanted to learn how. But once he did it, he realized it was useful, and he spread it to a lot of other people. And at first, you would think, okay, that's probably going to annoy the town because they get a lot more appeals. But by using an AI to generate the appeals, they were all extremely well formed, well articulated, well typed, no problems, no errors. The town actually wrote him and thanked him for writing such well-formed appeals. It made their process easier to actually deal with the appeals. So there are times when AI just introduces itself in a way when handled properly and experienced, it makes all users better. I think it always comes down to the people and the experience.
Yes, it does. Delightful customer experiences are the best for sure.
Yes.
All right, so back to you, Andres, another question. How does product engineering keep up with new data analytics insights? For example, how do you make sure that the software you build can be re-architected or evolved to suit the findings as data flows into it?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. It just gets back to how do we construct when we're getting those data feeds. First, again, what data feeds? User input really, it's a very old school way of understanding how, who you are, right? So we should not rely on that. So now there are multiple data sources, external data sources that we can draw insights from, back to how Brett was explaining, right? That, getting the inputs is annoying, but then how do you really incorporate these loops into the core of the team that's actually making that experience, right? So that the development team itself, or the engineering, the design, the product. So this goes back to how we organize those teams and how we set them up for success. And large corporations that not necessarily digitally native, and what we found is there's a lot of silos that are involved in the construction of this software, hence this experience, right? So we have product from one side, we have design, we have engineering and QA, and they're different and they have different bosses to report to different places. What happens there is that the speed at which data flows, and we need to understand it to improve the product and the experience, is too slow. And there's a lot of translation that happens between product and design. When it reaches engineering, it's already outdated, or the data that is used, it's just too simple, right? It doesn't come from within, right? It's not constructed from the core of that intelligence of that machine. and it doesn't really feedback that machine. So we basically shifted a few years ago, and we said, well, we're not going to have these kind of highly specialized product here and design here and engineering here. We're going to work in cross-functional teams. We're going to put these guys together so that then when as more data flows, as they learn more about the experience, they can actually deliver what is desired and can make that product much more sensitive to this data. It's not possible to make an experience perfectly tailored from day one. It's a sprint by sprint approach. It's an iterative cycle. So how do you do it in a way that everybody understands what we have to build, and once the decision was made, we just go ahead and do it and release as quickly as we can? So we basically created this model that we call pods, which is cross-functional, everybody in one single team with the goals where the product KPIs, which are those products that make that would measure whether what we're doing is okay, not okay, or great. We have targets that have to do with how the experience is delivered and what's the level of customer delight, or what's the level of customer satisfaction with real, clear, measurable parameters. And this is not very scientific. This is about how we motivate that team. This is about the soft skills of that team. So as the team that is constructing the experience and building the software to deliver that experience learns and matures, the better the experience is. And this, we've proven this. We also can scale it, larger projects with multiple features, with multiple swim lanes constructing at the same time. How does that work at a larger scale? Well, what we found is that as we use the same methodology of maturity for every single team and we build this sort of pod ecosystem where all these teams are related and they're following the same general guidelines of customer delight, then a progressively better experience is delivered. And that's what all the metrics show. But in order to get this right, it's not just a matter of adopting an agile methodology or just following the Scrum book or the SAFe book or whatever. It's about alignment. It's about understanding every area of organization, having clear targets aligned to that particular customer experience that we're pursuing, making that the highest priority from the very, very top. And then that allows these different managers who own the product people and the design people, engineering people, to come together and allow these people to actually work in one team rather than in separate teams. So that brings better design, that brings better product architecture, it brings better engineering, construction, architecture underneath to support the scalability of the software. So as we're growing in user base and you're growing in feature sets, we can always make sure, going back to the basics, make sure that that experience is not really impacted. As you know, as you add features, things break as well. And so it's not just about the data we get and the insights, it's how we react to those. And generally, this more rounded, cohesive team makes sure that we don't really make these mistakes as we evolve the cycle of the product.
Yeah, I like the point that you talked about the common goal, because I think that's super important across the organization to really be able to achieve that exceptional customer experience at the end.
Yeah, so back to the Netflix experience, really, I mean, they won because of customer experience, right? So that's the ultimate goal. That's the goal of CEO, right? If you don't produce that customer experience, that they would not have been able to differentiate themselves from everybody else out there. And now in the streaming, I mean, we have streaming wars right now. Netflix is still out there. It's just the kind of first runner. It just keeps its position and it's fighting it well. Although, a lot of other, followers have really learned the techniques, that embraced it, and have delivered similar experiences. They stay afloat.
Definitely agree. There's a lot more competitors for them now than there ever was. So,
yeah.
I'm going to follow up with Brett. Actually, we're kind of talking about big data, data analytics, AI, which is often all about automating decision making. So, can AI control experience changes using the component structure that Andres touched upon?
Control is a strong word. I would say influence. I think the whole point about first having a very human-centric perspective on what success looks like, what a great experience looks like, what a positive set of outcomes is very important. And then you can inform and shape that based on data as it rolls in, as well as models that continue to refine and improve. So while you look at the recommendation engines of Netflix and other similar products, they constantly adapt and learn based on the live data that comes in from you, combined with models they've trained offline. As a matter of fact, people who use digital assistants, when they speak to it, I don't want to say the names because they're in my office and they're going to react, but when they use a digital assistant from Amazon or Google, it's not as if it's learning on the fly every time you talk, but the contribution of data and interactions you have goes back to people who then refine the models. And there is live data feeding those systems. If I ask what is the weather today in my town, it knows my town because it's a preference that either I set or it learned. It knows how to understand the question of weather, but the weather data itself is live and improving and changing all the time. So it becomes a very immediate and personalized experience that is a combination of back office trained things, models built on similar people and technologies, and then live data that all goes together. I think the experience will become much more adaptive. I was working with a studio that produces films and movies, and films are movies. But when they produce them, they were actually deciding, instead of just building it or doing a focus group to see which actors or what script, they started feeding scripts into AI and looking for patterns to see what was likely to be successful. Now, ultimately, someday we'll be watching movies entirely written by AI. That probably sounds crazy right now, but I've seen early versions of things like that. They're not as far off as you think. And companies like OpenAI can produce entire text from a simple opening statement. Using AI to better refine based on audience behaviors as well as current events to know whether a movie is going to work well if it's released this weekend is the kind of thinking that's going into producing the difference between something that makes a good opening and a great opening. So I think being informed by AI will change the experience, whether they're changing content or the interactive experience of working with an app or working with a voice assistant. It will be informed by AI, shaped by data, and personalized, hopefully using people who can still bring that human touch to the experience.
And I've seen that some videos created by AI, they're not there yet, but
No.
they're getting there for sure. It's very interesting to see what's actual snippets of the video, of the entire movie that they put together for the trailer of. And I think they read emotionally the audience, what made their heart beat, what made them, lean in. And so they took those interesting snippets and they put them together for a trailer. But yeah, it's getting there, but not there yet.
People think that AI is not inherently creative. There's already been art that's been auctioned off, completely generated by AI. There are court battles right now over whether AI can have patents because AI can generate innovative ideas. So is an AI allowed to patent, or do you need a human to patent? And we've all seen AI that can generate images of people that don't exist, that look as real as you and I. And so I think the potential is great. I think people overthink it though, as if it's taking over. And I really can't overemphasize the fact that at best it augments people who actually make decisions, what movies to produce, what apps to do. Everything we do is really still very much a human decision informed by AI.
Definitely. But I do want to now get back to a shared question here, just taking a step back because we've kind of been in the weeds a little bit and talk about, how actually deploying data empowered user experiences, from a 1,000-foot view, when defining something to build upfront, like what role do user personas play? I'm sure they do an important part in creating a business case for AI.
Yeah, so it's, as you know, the user personas and persona definition is the typical, and journeys are, they're very typical and basic kind of product design. And we use that in workshops, and this is when we all meet and we figured out, what the experience, at least the base scenario of that experience for a certain persona is as we're building products. That will continue to exist. Now remotely, we have to go virtual and do these virtual. But beyond that, really, the ultimate effect, what we want and we expect from AI, which is something that is, as Brett point, is augments the user. It just really is where, you know, it allows people to become more efficient, you know, without having to explicitly ask for it, or, you know, without having to explicitly learn a new skill, that you learn it because it's just augmented by the tool. That's where AI and experiences are really welcome, right? That's because I think that that's where we really produce that positive impact, rather than just always thinking about this paranoia about replacement, right? The robots are going to take over and all that. You know, we don't see it that way at all. I think that the way we see it is that there is a lot more pluses than minuses here. But how do you build those personas? How do you start up? And now, more so now in a virtual environment. So we continue having these virtual workshops at Softvision. What we have done, though, because a lot of us, including myself, come from a gaming background, is to instill how do we learn and how do we mature better as to, you know, how do we incorporate insights faster and more comprehensively in everything we do, even in persona mapping, right? From persona mapping to augmenting those journeys as we move on in the cycle of development. So we actually, for example, this is something that is very relevant from the start of each team, as we onboard each team that's going to start developing either a persona journey or a piece of it. And we built a game, we call it Game of Pods. And as we explain these cross-functional teams, how do we support these teams? How do we allow them to set up goals? How those goals kind of translate to personal rewards and career growth for each member of the pod. That's also very important. You would think, but we're talking about persona definition and he's talking about how we motivate people. Well, as we motivate the teams that are building the product and they learn in their own skill set and they learn about the experience will maximize as well. It's all connected, right? So we have put together and created some IP that help in the process of constructing software to maximize these experiences. And one of those is this Game of Pods. We have also virtual workshops where we use specific tool sets that allow us to share ideas and categorize insights and prioritize features and outline, you know, experiences in a very clear way if we cannot sit together. So tooling, the methodology normally helps, but overall is that sort of push to improve in a way that is not stressful is what actually takes us always to the next level and allow us to make, or at least monetize or get much more bang for the buck on the data that we get. And the additional data that we can also, from the product itself, collect. Because in many cases, as you know, following the Netflix story, you know, Netflix in many ways, it learns from itself, you know, from others that are viewing that are similar to you that you might be interested in, because there's a lot of cross-referential framework there that exists, that if that were not applied well into the product, it wouldn't have, you know, rendered that type of experience. But the key here is how to motivate the people that are building these experiences to really take it up to the next level. So, you know, this kind of set of methods and tools allow us, or at least provide teams with a foundation to always look forward and never think that it's good enough. It's always one notch better, iteration by iteration.
Continuous improvement.
Totally, yeah.
Thanks, Andres. All right, so really quick, Brett, because we're gonna go into Q&A, but final question. Like we talked about earlier, AI, data, you know, everything that's hot in the market right now, you know, those are big topics. I was just thinking, like, if you could use every source of data possible at Cognizant, like we were talking about earlier, like getting every piece of data possible, would you be either Superman or would you be out of a job?
I don't think either. Again, I'll go back to this idea that all the data in the world doesn't make you digital, but knowing exactly which data matters is a superpower. And so when you have a really well-trained data scientist or data engineer, they know exactly which data and there's ways to test this, there's tools and techniques for this, but which data has the highest relationship to the business goal you have? If my number one goal is to convert you to buy something in this experience, what is the insight that I need about you that will allow me to make the best possible offer to get you to buy that? I was talking to a utility company, and they said they wanted to help optimize their call center, and they have an AI in their call center. They said, everyone who calls costs us money. They said, we want to make sure no one ever calls. I said, what you really want is the next call to be the last time they ever need to call. So the question is, what can you learn from that next experience with them that'll make you know so much about them that you can satisfy their needs without them having to call? And we came up with a whole bunch of techniques around that. I think knowing which data matters and having your finger on that data is the superpower to look for.
All right, love it. Thanks, Brett. So let's move into Q&A now. I want to just thank everyone for submitting your questions. If you do have, any other questions, we have a few, but feel free to continue to send them. So the first question I will ask to both of you: AI and ML, or machine learning solutions, are typically challenged by credibility, reliability, and quality. So how those challenges can be embraced to, user experience strategy?
Who wants to? I can take my part from
Either or.
From a product engineering point of view. Don't make any assumptions, right? So the challenge for credibility. Okay, so test credibility in a safe way, right? So if you have an insight and you don't know if it's true or false, you need to be able. So the product needs to be able to output, either do A/B testing, but figure it out in a way that is short and is clear, and it gives you an answer that you can rely on. So augments that kind of credibility by just testing and not assuming anything.
Yeah, I'll add to that I think a lot of times people worry about garbage in, garbage out. If they don't have good data, can they even make an informed decision? Again, don't assume anything, but think about the outcomes you're trying to generate, whether you even have the data to do it or not, and that'll lead you to whether you need something just sort of scripted and safe, or whether you're going to rely on the data to produce an outcome. I think back to the very first system I ever interacted with that felt like AI was called Eliza. And it was basically a chatbot you could talk to, and it was like a therapist chatbot. Came out a long time ago, before I was even born. But the point of it is, it felt like it understood us, but it actually produced nothing of value. And so what you want to be very careful of is not over engineering this to make it look like it's useful and not be. Simpler is sometimes better, as long as you're focused on the experience first, not the data and the AI first.
So definitely testing and being simplistic by approach. All right. So the next question we have is, are you building a user experience strategy? How do you build a user experience strategy for multiple user groups, such as a producer, a developer, provider, and consumer? And beyond that, any examples you can share to help kind of illustrate that?
Brad, do you want to? I mean, it's a you give a go, and then I go. I start. Yeah.
Everything has multiple stakeholders, and I think once you recognize the people who build and the people who consume. I'll give you an example. We run a bunch of systems inside Cognizant to help us predict and to manage our operations. Until very recently, a report would come to me. I would massage the report. It would flow through 10 people before it got to our CEO. Now, all these systems have been automated and updated to a point where our leadership gets the output the same moment I do. So the different levels of consumers who are all considered, the data goes to everyone at the same time. My role changed. And so by the nature of data coming out in real time to everyone, what's really shifted is now I need to be more forward looking. I need to be prepared before the data comes to know what it's going to be. So when it gets produced, I don't get questions I can't answer. I think this idea of recognizing that these are transformational projects and that you design for the roles, but recognize the roles also change as you introduce capabilities. And you have to consider all the stakeholders, the end consumer, the people in the middle of a supply chain of information or decisions, the providers of it, the developers. Everyone has a role in this.
Yeah, so from a team organization point of view, we got up at, the product has to be seen as a cohesive. It's just a whole, right? So if we go and we think that a product is an aggregate of different UX journeys, that's the wrong strategy. The right strategy sees the product. What is the outcome that we're trying to get to? What do we want to get of that? What's the right level of experience? And that kind of defines the roles for people. And the outcome really defines the role. we have a definition for that. We call it outcome engineering. It's, you first think about the outcome and then think about who else is involved, who are the people, who are the personas involved, and what are the right roles to produce that outcome. Because otherwise, you would be creating a UX strategy that is biased on the current state, not on the future state. So project future state, figure out the product as a whole, outcome, and then go back to definition of the roles. And that, to Brett's point, it's exactly, I think about the same thing, which is, okay, maybe my role will be different because the role for the outcome that I need is not necessary anymore, or maybe it's a tweak of the current role. And that's how the right strategy, UX strategies is actually defined.
Thanks. So we have another quick question. And this one, I think it's around low-hanging fruit, or some examples maybe you guys can provide. It's around what sort of human decisions or steps in system processes that AI can help ease or take on.
A couple of simple ones, obviously, understanding and ingesting a lot of data. And so natural language processing can be used on huge volumes of data, whether it's contracts, customer service complaints, anything, and really summarize, paraphrase, extract meaning from that data at scale better than people, frankly. The same can be true for monitoring of video systems and image systems for security or traffic, or now we're doing solutions to look for social distancing and mask compliance and surface washing compliance. We can use image systems to do that. That's better than rooms full of people. So there are just certain tasks that require ingestion and comprehension of large volumes of data done all the time at scale. Those are systems that are well formed for AI.
Andres, anything to add to that, or?
No, I think it's the full response, yeah.
No worries. All right, so the next one is, how can I start to practice with really small exercises in which I gather data to bring results to my superiors in the company I work for? So I think this is kind of around, business cases and being able to bring that forward.
I think, the most important thing is what matters, right? What kind of data matters? What frequency do you need the data so that it matters? It's not just about producing a report or just gathering and just creating a piece of software that will just output a report. It's basically understanding, what is that, what closely related to what revenue? Are you looking for efficiencies? What is it going to actually allow people to make the right decisions? Is that tool that you're building going to recommend any courses of actions to take? So that's where I would start thinking about it and defining the tool or whatever you want to build, and the data sources from that point onwards. And that would be my recommendation.
The other thing I'll add to that is we did a project for a very large retailer during COVID who realized that all their forecast models that they've been working on for years were no longer applicable because human behavior changed, everything went crazy, as we all know. And so in a very short sprint, just 2 weeks of work, we were able to generate new forecast models and a front end that allowed them to select the right one for the given conditions and location to know which model was most likely to be accurate for what they were doing. We drove a huge improvement in accuracy for them, and it was a really short sprint. It was not a massive re-engineering. I think if you ask yourself what's not working, and no matter how many people you throw at it, it's not going to get better. You got to look for problems that are better solved or lend themselves to machine learning techniques or AI, and just try them. See what data you do have. See whether a better outcome is possible. Do the experiment. Have a hypothesis. Do the experiment. Prove it to yourself before you prove it to others.
Good advice. Thanks, guys. Another one that we have, I think it's more around culture. So how can we set the mindset to measure the experiences to those internal clients who are potentially immature in user experience metrics?
Well, I would question that assumption, actually, because, customers or employees or internal customers are also consumers, and they probably are, I wouldn't say that they don't know it. They're probably are either rejecting the experience because they have experienced a much better way elsewhere with another product. Think about somebody that is working in an office or now working from home and has to use tools that the company provides. Also accesses the Amazons, the Netflixes, and Disney Plus, and interacts with a lot of digital assets out there that provide a superior experience. So experience for a user is also the experience for an employee. It should be the same. And it's really the goal of companies to elevate this level of experience and treat people that work in companies as real consumers of the tech that the company has either procured, improved, and a lot of the companies are going to differentiate themselves, and their talent strategy is going to be very, very, I would say, very telling by how they, what they put in front of the employees and what kind of experience they create. In the days of COVID, as we are all working from home, digital products that companies put in front of people are most important than, you know, any other time in history, because we are all doing this right now. So if the tool sets and the experience is substandard, those people will be, you know, probably the best people that have a chance to get on a job, just jump off ship and just go somewhere else. So it's very important that we treat a person as, you know, and we deliver high grade consumer experiences, regardless of where they are. People are not going to be forced to use technology or substandard technology anymore. They will have a choice. So we need to be really, as executives of companies and people that make decisions, we need to be very conscious of that reality.
Yeah, very good point. And we're almost at time, so I have our final question and would love examples from both of you if possible. But which of the products and service providers are market leaders in AI and data analytics kind of projects? Like, what are the key differentiators in those products? If you guys can give examples. You're both consumers, so would love your thoughts on what stand out.
That is a really hard question.
That's a very hard question, yes.
Okay, well, I don't want to name names because we love all the technology companies. But I think there are several experiences, for example, in mapping and navigation that I think bring together the best in predictive analytics, real-time data acquisition, social platforms to allow you to not just know the best way to get from here to there, but the best way to get from here to there right now. And that guidance changes constantly based on real-time input from other users, from traffic data, even from pothole data. And I think when you bring together a full social, AI, data-driven platform like that, it gets adoption with zero advertising. And that one happened to get, if you know what it is, gets lots of usage based purely on word of mouth. I would often get in a car and someone say, "Do you use this thing? This is amazing." That tells me right there the level of experience and the fact that no one even thinks about the AI or the data behind it.
We can interpret that in so many ways.
So there are products that definitely combine multiple sources and different techniques and experiences. Fascinating. But I would like to also, you know, point out that there is tremendous innovation being done in more traditional industries. Fintech is very interesting, and there are some products. I'm not going to mention any names because some of them are our clients, but fintech is really coming up with experiences that really help people improve their financial health. You know, figure it out what their portfolio strategy is without complicating them, right? So most products that you've seen, I'm sure people that, you know, if you have an account, again, I'm not going to mention, but if you have an account at one of those online traders, you'll see that it's extremely complicated and the experience is bad. Well, there is tremendous, and it's coming up, so you will see it eventually. There's tremendous innovation has been done to really simplify this experience model and bring people to a level of increased level of credibility of the financial products that they put out there. And then up and coming, I think that after COVID, we are seeing a lot of investment also in healthcare. So the healthcare has always been behind, but we will see those investments coming, you know, bearing fruit in the next, I would say, 6 to 18 months, where we'll see really cool things coming up in insurance as well. So there's tremendous kind of cross-pollination of what has happened in the mapping industry or in the online commerce industry that are kind of permeating others. So hopefully we'll see them more generalized. So I didn't want to say, you know, these are the ones that are winning today, but there are definitely winners in the future that we haven't really thought about so far.
Well, thank you. We look forward to those delightful user experiences to come. And it has been a delight to have both of you on and host you both for the webinar, AI to UX. So thank you both. And to all of those who joined, we are at time, so we do have to close this exciting conversation. But please remember, we will be sending out the replay within 24 hours. And I hope you all enjoyed your time today and have a wonderful day. Enjoy.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.